The following years, heavily overshadowed by Oliver's persistent emotional detachment and coldness, had left me with a deep, aching craving for solitude. That particular day offered one of those exceedingly rare opportunities to grasp at a moment of freedom. Within the sanctuary of my room, surrounded by the familiar comforts of my personal space, I had set up my laptop and meticulously arranged a few of my belongings around me. Looking back, that afternoon appeared completely ordinary at its inception, yet it turned out to be one of those pivotal, life-altering moments. Everything had been proceeding as usual. I was home alone, as Oliver was away on yet another of his endless work trips. The only silver lining to his constant absence was the chance to carve out a bit of personal space, a luxury I hadn't prioritized in years. Before James returned from university, these quiet stretches were a normal part of my daily routine, but now they were a rare and infrequent indulgence. Unbeknownst to me, the door to my room hadn't completely clicked shut. Just as I started to truly relax, James, Oliver's son from a previous marriage, appeared. James had always evoked feelings in me that were difficult to categorize or ignore. His tall stature, sharp, defined features, and that piercing, intense gaze had unnerved me from the very first time we were introduced. I had consistently told myself it was only a fleeting, superficial thought, especially since he was supposed to be out with his friends and wasn't expected back until much later. This assumption made me feel safe withdrawing to my room for some much-needed private time. When he appeared, I tried to hide what I was holding out of sheer instinct, but the effort was futile. The sounds from my laptop filled the heavy silence, and his wide-eyed, stunned gaze said everything that didn't need to be spoken. My body froze, paralyzed by an inability to conceal the awkwardness or mute the noise emanating from the screen. I was terrified that my heart would literally burst from my chest. James's expression was a haunting mix of shock, curiosity, and perhaps something much deeper, a dark, unspoken tension that hung thick in the air. In that moment of exposure, I realized my feelings weren't just rooted in embarrassment. His gaze forced me to confront the hollow emptiness I'd been carrying inside for far too long. "I should have knocked," James whispered, his voice low and tremulous. He slowly began to back away, never once breaking eye contact, and gently pulled the door shut behind him. I sat there completely stunned, unsure of the physics of what had just transpired, but absolutely certain that the dynamic between us had shifted. Something forbidden, dangerous, and undeniably tempting had been ignited. As soon as the door clicked shut, I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in my hands. What had I done? I was 42 years old, and Oliver's son, my stepson, had caught me in such an incredibly vulnerable state. My mind became a broken record, replaying the scene over and over, each repetition amplifying a strange, forbidden warmth within me. Despite the shame threatening to consume me, I couldn't ignore that there was more than just surprise in his eyes. It was as if he understood me, or perhaps he wanted something more. Even entertaining the thought felt revolting, yet I couldn't stop the adrenaline. I'd noticed James's lingering glances before, the subtle, quiet expressions of interest, but I'd always dismissed them as figments of my imagination. I pretended they didn't exist until that very moment. That encounter changed the landscape of our home. For the next 3 days, Oliver would remain away, leaving only James and me. I dreaded facing him, yet beneath the layers of fear lurked a pulse of excitement that was impossible to ignore. It felt illicit and perilous. The following day passed in a strained, near-silent tension. James stayed holed up in his room, and after I hastily prepared a meal, I retreated to the living room. It was as though we'd entered a silent pact not to acknowledge the elephant in the room, yet the air between us was heavy and charged with a kinetic energy we both recognized. By evening, I decided to take a shower to clear my head. As the warm water cascaded over me, I tried to wash away the memory, but James's intense expression kept resurfacing. Suddenly, the power went out. The house was plunged into a thick, absolute darkness. Wrapped in a robe, I tied it securely and stepped out into the hallway. "Emma, are you okay?" James's voice called out from the darkness. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice wavering. "I think the power is just out." I moved toward the sound of his voice, entering the kitchen where the faint glow from a street lamp barely touched the shadows. As we both fumbled in the dark for candles, I accidentally stumbled directly into him. My shoulder hit his chest, and we both froze, holding our breath. His hands instinctively went to my waist to steady me, but the touch lingered. It felt deliberate. "I didn't see you," James whispered, his voice barely audible. Our eyes locked in the dim light, and the connection between us was stronger than anything I'd ever felt. My heart thundered so loudly I was certain he could hear it. James's gaze dropped to my lips, and his warm breath brushed against my skin. "Emma," he breathed, his voice thick with raw emotion. Every boundary I'd clung to seemed to dissolve in that kitchen. Just then, the lights flickered back on, jolting us back to reality. We stepped back abruptly, as if we'd been caught in a crime. Later, in the living room, James followed me. There was a new, determined glint in his eyes. "Emma, we need to talk," he said. His tone made it clear that this wouldn't be a superficial conversation. We sat across from each other, the tension suffocating. "Emma, I'm sorry about yesterday," he began softly. "When I saw the door open, I shouldn't have looked, but I couldn't stop the rush of emotions." His apology stirred something deep within me. "I was just so embarrassed," I whispered. James sighed and leaned closer. "You're lonely, Emma, and that's not your fault." Hearing my loneliness articulated so plainly broke my defenses. Tears welled up in my eyes. I thought I had gotten used to it, but sometimes it's overwhelming. James placed his hand over mine, and my breath hitched. "You shouldn't have to feel lonely," he said firmly. In that moment, I realized he was serious. This wasn't a misunderstanding. To shift the heavy mood, I asked about his ex-girlfriend, Carly. "I haven't felt anything for her in a long time," James admitted. "I ended it because I like you, Emma. You've been on my mind for a while." I opened my mouth to respond, but James gently placed his hands on my waist and pulled me closer. Our lips were mere inches apart. This was the point of no return. When he finally kissed me, time stood still. His warmth and certainty consumed me. At some point, the intensity overwhelmed me, and I felt compelled to act. I broke the kiss just enough to catch my breath and whispered, "I've been drawn to you for a while now." Every barrier crumbled. I took a deep breath, stood up, and let the robe slip from my shoulders. James's eyes followed every movement as the fabric pooled at my feet. I walked toward the couch, and he didn't hesitate. One by one, he removed his clothes with deliberate care. He knelt beside me, his hands gripping the cushions, and when his lips found mine again, it was an explosion of every suppressed longing born from years of neglect. The next few days were a blur of exhilaration and unease. We crossed boundaries I never imagined I'd dare to breach. James filled the void Oliver had left, making me feel alive again. But secrets never stay buried. Oliver returned as detached as ever, but James and I continued to exchange hidden messages. One evening, Oliver announced he wouldn't be home for the night. I messaged James, "Oliver isn't home tonight, it's just us, I can't wait." But James was dealing with his own crisis. Carly, his obsessive ex, was refusing to let go. "Stay out of my life," James told her during a confrontation. But then his phone buzzed. Carly snatched it, her face twisting into a mask of fury. "I knew it! I saw you two kissing! I'll tell Oliver everything!" The situation spiraled. The next day, Oliver's behavior was terrifyingly different. He was attentive, watching me with a suspicious, cold eye. "Is something going on, Emma?" Oliver asked. My fear grew until I texted James, "Oliver is acting so strange, I'm scared." Just as I hit send, the doorbell rang. Oliver opened it, and Carly's voice echoed down the hall. An icy chill ran through me as she stepped into view, a slick, calculated smile on her lips. "Hello, Emma," she said, her tone mocking. "It looks like we have a lot to talk about." In that moment, everything shattered. My hands shook uncontrollably as I looked at James, whose eyes mirrored my own terror. Carly's menacing smile was the most terrifying thing in the room. This was only the beginning.